The Crimson Lily Hotel didn't feel like a place built for humans. It felt like a castle that had learned to hide inside a city. The chandeliers glittered like frozen tears. The marble floors shone like black water, and the air always carried a cold sweetness flowers, mixed with something older, like metal after rain. Era kept her eyes down and her steps quiet, because that was the first rule of surviving here. Be invisible. Be useful. Never invite attention from the guests who arrived only after sunset. Era was painfully human in a world that treated humans like temporary furniture. Her uniform was clean, but worn at the seams. Her hands were rough from work, and her mind was never truly in the hotel. It was always in the small apartment across town, where her younger brother Leo lay sick too often, where medicine bottles lined the table like tiny guards against disaster. Every extra shift meant one more week of hope. Every mistake meant losing everything. She had learned to swallow insults the way she swallowed fear quietly, quickly, and without anyone noticing. That night, the lobby was crowded for midnight. Vampires drifted through the space as if they owned the air itself. Men in sharp suits moved with a calm that felt unnatural, and women in dark gowns wore jewels that looked too heavy to be real. Their laughter was soft, their smiles too slow. Era pushed her cleaning cart toward the service elevator and told herself to focus on simple things: towels, key cards, room numbers, polite words. She was almost there when a scream cut through the lobby like a blade. Thief! The word slammed into the silence and made every head turn at once. Era froze. The cart wheels stopped. Her heart tried to jump out of her chest. At the front desk stood Lady Isadora, one of the noble guests whose presence made the staff's stomachs tighten. She was beautiful in a way that felt cruel, with hair pale as moonlight and eyes red as fresh wine. Her gloved hand rose, and her finger pointed straight at Era, as if the air itself had chosen a target. "It was on my vanity," Isadora said, her voice smooth and icy. "A blood ruby amulet, a gift from the Venetian court. When I returned, it was gone. Only the human girl had been inside my suite." The lobby didn't just go quiet. It went still. Dozens of eyes fixed on Era, and she suddenly felt too warm, too alive, too easy to break. Her mouth opened, but her throat tightened. She could hear her own breathing, fast and shallow. She saw her future collapse in her mind, like glass falling from a table. No job, no pay, no medicine, no Leo. "I didn't," Era managed, the words trembling. "I swear, I didn't take anything. I only changed the towels. I didn't even—" "It's always the quiet ones," Isadora said, moving closer with a smile that wasn't kind. "They hide their greed behind humble faces." The night manager, Mr. Lauron, rushed out from his office, sweat shining on his forehead. He was human too, but he worked for the kind that never forgave mistakes. His eyes were full of panic, not sympathy. He grabbed Era's arm, like she was already guilty, and hissed through clenched teeth, "Era, come with me. We will handle this properly. Do not cause a scene." Era felt the pressure of his grip, and something inside her cracked. "Please," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "I didn't do it. Please, I have to work. My brother." Then the air changed. It wasn't dramatic like thunder. It was worse because it was silent. The temperature seemed to drop, and a weight pressed down on the lobby as if the building itself had bowed its head. A voice spoke from the shadow near the grand staircase. Not loud, not angry, yet it filled every corner of the room. "Release her." Mr. Lauron's hand jerked away as if he touched fire. Era turned, unable to stop herself, and saw him stepping forward tall, perfectly still, dressed in black as if darkness had chosen a human shape. His hair was the color of a raven's wing, and his eyes were not red like Isadora's. They were cobalt blue, sharp and deep, and they held the kind of authority that made everyone else look smaller. The vampires in the lobby shifted, not in fear, but in instinct. Heads lowered, space opened. Even Isadora's confidence faltered, and she dipped into a respectful curtsy, her pride swallowed by something older than pride. Lord Cashin, she breathed. Era had heard rumors of him, whispers, in staff corridors, warnings passed like secrets. The oldest, the king, the one who ruled not with noise, but with certainty. She had never expected to be close enough to feel his presence like a storm. Cashin didn't look at Isidora at first. His gaze stayed on Era, and for a second she felt exposed in a way that frightened her more than the accusation. It wasn't hunger in his eyes. It was something else, recognition, as if he had seen that exact fear before. Lady Isidora, Cashin said at last, his voice calm, final. You have misplaced your amulet. A ripple moved through the lobby. Isidora's lips parted in disbelief. My lord, that is impossible. The human, you have misplaced it, he repeated, and the words left no space for argument. Return to your suite. Search again. When you find it, reflect on the embarrassment of accusing an innocent girl in public. Isidora's face tightened, humiliation sharpening her beauty into something dangerous. Her red eyes flicked to Era with venom, promising this wasn't finished. But she didn't challenge him. She turned sharply and swept toward the elevator, her pride bleeding invisibly into the air. Era stood frozen, her knees weak, her hands trembling. The lobby slowly began to breathe again, but she couldn't. Cashin stepped in front of her like a wall, shielding her from the stares that had been ready to tear her apart. He looked at Mr. Laurent with a cold patience that felt more threatening than rage. See to your guests, Cashin said. Mr. Laurent bowed so fast it looked painful. Yes, my lord. Of course, my lord. Then Cashin turned to Era, and his voice softened by a fraction. Come, he said. Somewhere you can breathe. Era's lips trembled. Where? Cashin nodded toward a private elevator, its gold doors gleaming like a warning. Up, he said simply. Era's stomach dropped. Every instinct told her to run, but the lobby behind her felt like a trap, and the only open door was the one the king himself had offered. She swallowed her fear, tightened her grip on her trembling hands, and stepped forward, because in that moment, Era understood one terrifying truth. Her life as an invisible girl was over. She had been accused like prey. And then the king of monsters chose to stand between her and the world. 3 days passed after the accusation, yet the air inside the Crimson Lily Hotel never truly settled. Era returned to work because she had no choice, but nothing felt the same. The whispers followed her down every hallway, sliding between staff members like smoke. Some looked at her with awe, others with suspicion, as if she had done something dangerous by simply being defended. The easiest tasks were suddenly handed to her without argument, and no one dared raise their voice at her. Protection from a king was not a small thing. It was a shadow that stretched far and cold. Ira tried to focus on normal routines. She cleaned mirrors until they reflected nothing but her tired face. She folded linens with careful precision. She reminded herself that Leo still needed medicine, that rent was still due, that survival did not care about drama. But each time she stepped into the lobby, she felt those ancient eyes linger longer than before. Lady Isidora had not returned, yet her absence felt heavier than her presence. Rumors said the amulet had been found exactly where Lord Cashin claimed it would be. No apology had followed. It was late when Era finished polishing the East Wing corridor. The chandeliers above her flickered gently, casting shadows that seemed alive. She bent to pick up her cleaning bucket when a familiar cold brushed across her skin. The temperature dipped, subtle but undeniable. She straightened slowly, already knowing who stood behind her. You are scrubbing a floor that is already spotless. Cashin's voice said quietly. Era turned, heart jumping despite herself. He was dressed simply tonight in black, without the dramatic formality of the lobby. Yet the power around him remained unchanged. It was not loud or aggressive. It was controlled, like a storm held in a closed hand. She lowered her gaze instinctively, unsure how to speak to someone who could silence a room with a sentence. "My lord?" "I was just finishing," she replied softly. "You have been avoiding me," he observed, not accusing, merely stating a fact. "I did not know if I was meant to speak to you," she admitted, the truth slipping out before fear could stop it. "Look at me, Era." The command was gentle but firm. She raised her eyes, and for a brief second she forgot to breathe. Up close, his cobalt gaze was not cruel. It was heavy with thought, like someone who carried centuries of unfinished conversations. He studied her not as prey, not as possession, but as something he was trying to understand. "In 2 nights," he said, holding out a sealed envelope bearing a raven crest, "the Blood Moon Conclave will be held in this hotel. It is a gathering of my kind, politics, debates, alliances." His tone shifted slightly, almost weary. A room filled with power and very little honesty. Era's fingers tightened around her cloth. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I wish you to attend," he answered. She stared at him in disbelief. "Attend? My lord, I am a maid. I serve drinks and fold sheets. I do not belong in a gathering like that." "That," he replied calmly, "is precisely why you do." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so it would not echo in the corridor. "You spoke truth in the lobby when fear could have silenced you. Most in that ballroom have not spoken truth in centuries. I require someone who remembers what humanity feels like." Era's heart pounded harder than it had during the accusation. "You want me there as what?" "As my guest," he said without hesitation. The words carried weight. "Not servant, not staff, guest. I would embarrass you," she whispered. "I do not know your customs. I do not know the rules." "You are incapable of embarrassing me," Cashin replied quietly. "Your honesty would shame them far more than your ignorance." He placed the envelope gently in her hand. It felt heavy, despite its thin paper. "Inside are instructions. You will not work that night. My attendant will prepare you." Prepare her. The thought alone made her stomach twist. Yet beneath the fear, something else stirred curiosity, perhaps even purpose. For the first time since working here, she was not being summoned as invisible labor. She was being asked to stand in the light. "And if they dislike that?" she asked carefully. Cashin's gaze darkened slightly. "They already do." A silence passed between them, not uncomfortable, but charged. Era realized he was not commanding her. He was offering a choice. For a king, that was rare. "I will come," she said finally. He inclined his head once, satisfied but not triumphant. "Good. Do not fear the room, Era. Fear only silence." With that, he stepped back, the cold around him receding like a tide. Era remained alone in the corridor, staring at the raven seal in her trembling hand. She had survived humiliation. She had survived being seen. Now she was stepping willingly into a room filled with creatures who believed humans were nothing more than resources. And somewhere beneath the hotel's glittering ceilings, forces that resented Cashin's protection were already watching. The blood moon was rising. The invitation was not a reward. It was an entrance into a war she did not yet understand. Asterisk, the Blood Moon Conclave ended not with music or celebration, but with a tension that clung to the air like smoke after fire. Era walked beside Cashin through the private terrace doors, her heartbeat still unsteady from everything she had witnessed inside the grand ballroom. The obsidian ceiling, a sea of ancient faces, the way every conversation felt like a duel hidden behind polite smiles. It had all left her shaken. Yet what stayed with her most was the moment she spoke. She had defended human lives in front of predators, and Cashin had stood beside her without hesitation. Cool night air brushed her skin as they stepped onto the terrace overlooking New Orleans. The city lights glittered below like fallen stars, fragile compared to the immortal world behind them. Era exhaled slowly, trying to release the tightness in her chest. "I spoke out of turn," she said quietly. "I should not have interrupted Lord Marcus. I might have caused trouble for you." Cashin turned toward her, his expression thoughtful rather than annoyed. "You did exactly what I asked. You spoke truth where others speak convenience." He paused, studying her face. "For 500 years, that ballroom has felt like a prison to me. Tonight, because of you, it felt less empty." The words settled between them, heavier than compliments. Era felt warmth rise to her cheeks, uncertain how to respond to praise from someone feared by entire nations. She lowered her gaze, fingers tightening around the velvet fabric of her gown. Before she could speak again, hurried footsteps echoed behind them. A young vampire messenger rushed onto the terrace, stopping abruptly when he saw Era. He bowed quickly, fear visible even in the stiffness of his posture. "My Lord Cashin, forgive the intrusion. A report from the council. An accusation has been filed." Cashin's posture changed instantly. The calm presence around him hardened into cold authority. "What accusation?" The messenger swallowed. "You are charged with violating the most sacred law of the conclave, the unlawful creation of a fledgling." Era frowned in confusion, but Cashin's eyes narrowed slightly. "That is impossible. I have turned no one." "There is more, my lord," the messenger added, voice trembling. "They claim the fledgling has been located in the human hospitals." Cashin stepped forward, tension coiling in his shoulders. "Name?" The messenger hesitated, glancing once at Era before answering. "Leo." The world stopped. Era's breath vanished from her lungs, as if someone had struck her chest. Her ears rang, drowning out the city noise below. She stared at the messenger, certain she had heard wrong. "My lord?" "The boy's full name matches her family records," he continued nervously. "The council believes the turning was done in secret, and that you used the human girl as cover." Era staggered back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. "No, that's not possible. Leo is sick, but he's human. He's always been human." She turned desperately toward Cashin, fear flooding her voice. "Tell them. Tell them it's a lie." Before Cashin could respond, the terrace doors opened again. Lady Isadora entered with elegant calm, her red eyes shining with satisfaction. Beside her stood Lord Marcus, his charming smile sharpened by triumph. Behind them, 2 armored council guards took silent positions. Marcus clasped his hands as if delivering sad news. "My king, this is most unfortunate. To illegally turn a human child, and the brother of your favored human at that, is a grave offense." "That is a lie," Era said fiercely, though her voice shook. "You're lying." Isadora tilted her head, feigning pity. "We located the boy ourselves, feverish, pale, showing early signs of the change. A sloppy, illegal turning, one might say." Era's heart pounded violently. She looked at Cashin again, needing reassurance, needing certainty. For a single terrible moment, doubt crept into her mind. Leo had been sick for weeks. His condition had worsened suddenly. Cashin had power beyond her understanding. "Did you go to him?" she whispered, the question tearing out of her before she could stop it. Cashin froze. The silence that followed was colder than anger. His eyes darkened, not with rage, but with something far more wounded. "Betrayal. You too, Era," he said quietly. The words struck harder than any accusation. She wanted to take them back instantly, but it was too late. Marcus's smile widened slightly, sensing victory. "The council demands your immediate detainment until judgment," Marcus announced. The guard stepped forward. Cassian did not resist. He simply straightened his coat, dignity intact even in arrest. As they moved past Era, he paused just long enough to lean close, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "It was not me. They are lying. Find the truth." Then he was gone, taken through the elevator doors like a king swallowed by shadow. Era stood frozen on the terrace, the city lights blurring through tears she refused to let fall. Isidora's satisfied gaze lingered on her before she turned away, already celebrating. Within minutes, everything collapsed. Era was stripped of her gown, her jewelry, her temporary place beside power. She was dismissed, fired, and escorted out like a contaminant. She ran through the humid night streets until her lungs burned, until fear drove her faster than exhaustion. When she burst into her apartment, her hands were shaking so violently she could barely open the door. Leo lay in bed exactly where she left him, pale, sweating, breathing shallow, but alive. Era rushed to his side, gripping his hand tightly as dread settled into her bones. Whatever game Marcus and Isidora had begun, it was no longer political. It was personal. The accusation had taken the king. But the war had only just come for the girl. Asterisk sleep did not come to Era that night. She sat beside Leo's bed, pressing a cool cloth against his burning forehead while her thoughts raced in violent circles. His skin was pale, his pulse too slow, yet there were no fangs, no unnatural wounds, no signs of what the vampires called the change. She had read about it in hidden corners of the hotel library during long shifts. The transformation was not subtle. It did not hide quietly behind fever. Whatever Marcus and Isidora were claiming, it did not match what she saw with her own eyes. By morning, Leo's condition worsened. His fever spiked, and strange dark veins faintly marked his wrists like shadows beneath the skin. Era's fear sharpened into something steadier. Cassian's final words echoed in her mind. "It was not me. They are lying. Find the truth." If she allowed panic to control her, Marcus would win without effort. She needed answers, not tears. She took Leo to the public hospital, keeping her head down and avoiding any unfamiliar faces. Doctors ran tests, whispering about unusual blood anomalies they could not explain. One nurse mentioned elevated iron levels, mixed with something that resembled toxin contamination. The word toxin caught Era's attention immediately. Vampires did not create life through poison. Turning required ritual, consent, and controlled blood exchange under ancient law. This felt wrong, careless, almost experimental. While Leo rested under observation, Era searched through hospital corridors for records. She overheard a heated conversation between two interns discussing a recent patient who had shown similar symptoms after receiving a private blood enhancement treatment. The phrase sounded strange and out of place. When Era gently questioned one of them, she learned the procedure had been performed by an underground clinic operating without official approval. The name of the clinic chilled her: Crimson Veil Wellness. Crimson Veil was rumored among hotel staff to be a black market service for wealthy vampires seeking stronger blood or illegal experimentation. Era's heart pounded as the pieces began to align. If Leo had been poisoned with counterfeit vampire blood, it would mimic signs of transformation without actually creating a fledgling. It would be the perfect trap. The council would see symptoms and assume guilt. Cassian would appear reckless. Marcus would gain leverage. Era left the hospital determined, but she did not get far before sensing she was being followed. The city streets felt narrower, the air heavier. Two figures in dark coats trailed her from a distance, their movements too fluid to be human. Isidora's guards. Fear surged through her, but she forced herself not to run. Running would confirm suspicion. Instead, she ducked into a crowded marketplace, weaving between vendors and tourists. She slipped through a back alley she knew from years of commuting and climbed a rusted fire escape to reach a neighboring rooftop. The guards followed, but lost sight of her among the maze of buildings. Era's chest heaved as she crouched behind a ventilation unit, realizing the danger had grown sharper. They were not simply accusing her brother. They were hunting her. By nightfall, she located Crimson Vale's address hidden behind an abandoned pharmacy sign. The building looked quiet, but faint light glowed through boarded windows. She waited until the street emptied before slipping inside through a cracked rear door. The interior smelled metallic and sterile. Medical equipment lined the walls, and vials of dark liquid rested in refrigerated containers marked with coded labels. Era's hands trembled as she searched. In a drawer beneath a steel desk, she found records. Patient files with altered names, payment logs linked to anonymous noble accounts. One file caught her breath. Leo Ilian. The date matched the evening before the conclave. Attached was a payment authorization, signed with the familiar crest, the same silver serpent symbol Marcus wore on his ring. Her vision blurred with anger. Leo had never visited this place willingly. Someone had injected him, staged his illness, and reported it at the exact moment Cashin needed stability in the council. It was calculated cruelty. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Era quickly photographed the documents with her phone and slipped the file into her bag. The door creaked open, and a shadow fell across the floor. A tall vampire entered, his expression bored until he noticed her. His eyes widened, and instinct replaced surprise. Era ran. She burst through the rear exit and into the alley, adrenaline driving her faster than fear. The vampire's footsteps followed, but distant sirens distracted him long enough for her to disappear into the night once more. Breathing hard beneath a flickering streetlight, Era finally allowed herself one steady thought. Marcus had framed Cashin. Isadora had supported it. Leo was never turned, he was poisoned to imitate the change. And now she held proof. The war was no longer about politics. It was about truth. They had tried to break a king by targeting a girl, but they had forgotten that desperation can forge courage sharper than any blade. The council chamber was carved from black stone, older than the city itself, lit by torches that burned without smoke. Era had never seen this part of the Crimson Lily before. It existed beneath the hotel, hidden from human eyes, a place where ancient laws were spoken and destinies rewritten. The air felt heavy, not just with power, but with judgment. Vampires filled the circular hall, their expressions calm yet expectant, as if they had already decided the outcome. At the center stood Cashin, unchained yet surrounded by council guards. He looked as composed as ever, dressed in formal black, his posture straight and unbroken. Only his eyes betrayed the weight of betrayal and calculation. Marcus stood to one side, hands folded behind his back, the picture of respectful concern. Isadora remained slightly behind him, her crimson lips curved in quiet satisfaction. Era entered alone. Whispers rippled through the chamber at the sight of her. Some faces showed curiosity, others disdain. To them, she was only human, a temporary creature standing in a room of immortals. Yet she walked forward without lowering her gaze, clutching the evidence in her bag like a shield. Marcus spoke first. The accused stands charged with illegal turning of a minor human, a violation of sacred vampire law. The evidence is clear. The boy displays symptoms of the change. The boy displays symptoms of poisoning, Era interrupted, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. The chamber fell silent. One elder vampire narrowed his pale eyes. Humans do not address this council without sanction. She does, Marcus said smoothly, because she believes herself special. Cashin's gaze shifted toward Era, unreadable but attentive. She stepped forward and removed the documents from her bag, placing copies on the central stone table. Leo was injected with counterfeit vampire blood. It was purchased through an illegal clinic called Crimson Veil. The payment authorization carries Lord Marcus's crest. Gasps moved through the chamber like wind through leaves. Marcus's expression did not change, but his eyes hardened. "These are human papers," Marcus replied calmly. "Forged documents are not uncommon in desperate situations. They were stored in your funded clinic," Era said, refusing to retreat. "The symptoms were designed to mimic transformation. You wanted the council to believe Cashin broke the law." Isadora stepped forward sharply. Bold accusations from a servant girl. Era felt the weight of the room pressing down on her. She knew what would happen next. Without official standing, they could dismiss her testimony as irrelevant. A human voice meant nothing here. Marcus understood that too. His slight smile returned. "She is emotionally involved," he said gently. "Her brother's illness clouds her judgment. The council should not be swayed by sentiment." An elder rose slowly from his seat. "Unless the human holds recognized status under vampire law, her testimony carries no binding authority." The words struck like ice. Era's pulse quickened. All her evidence, all her courage, meant nothing if the council refused to recognize her standing. She looked toward Cashin, fear flickering beneath her strength. Cashin stepped forward. The guards shifted, but did not stop him. He faced the council, his voice calm but resonant enough to fill the chamber without effort. "There is a way." Marcus's brows lifted slightly, sensing something unexpected. Cashin turned toward Era, his eyes locking with hers. For a brief moment, the centuries of restraint in him seemed to crack, revealing something raw and fiercely protective. "Say that I'm your husband." The chamber erupted into stunned silence. Even the torches seemed to pause. Era's breath caught. She had expected strategy, perhaps political maneuvering, but not this. Under ancient law, the king's bonded spouse held sovereign protection. No council member could silence or dismiss such a witness without risking civil fracture. It was the oldest safeguard in their code. Marcus's composure faltered for the first time. "You would bind yourself to a human?" he demanded. Cashin did not look away from Era. "I would protect truth." Understanding dawned in her eyes. This was not romance, not spectacle. It was shield and sword in one act. If she declared the bond, her testimony would be legally binding. The council would be forced to examine the evidence fully. Her voice trembled only slightly as she spoke. "He is my husband." A ripple of shock swept through the chamber. The elder who had questioned her authority slowly inclined his head. "Then by law, her words carry weight equal to his." Marcus's smile vanished completely. Cashin moved to stand beside Era, not touching her, but close enough that the message was unmistakable. United, unyielding. "The clinic will be investigated," the elder declared. "If falsification is proven, consequences will be severe." For the first time since the accusation, Marcus looked uncertain. Era exhaled slowly, realizing the gravity of what had just happened. Cashin had risked his reputation, his pride, even political backlash, not for image, but for justice. The chamber had not expected love to be used as law, and that was why it worked. In a hall built on power and fear, the king chose something far more dangerous. He chose protection. Justice under the blood moon. The investigation did not take long once the council was forced to act. Evidence that had once been dismissed as human claims was now examined under royal authority. The illegal clinic Crimson Veil was raided before sunrise by council enforcers. Hidden laboratories were uncovered beneath its sterile floors, filled with counterfeit blood serums and experimental toxins designed to imitate the symptoms of transformation. Records, payment ledgers, and encrypted correspondences were seized, and every path led back to one name: Marcus. The council reconvened under the same black stone chamber, but the atmosphere had changed. Where once there had been quiet confidence, now there was tension edged with anger. Noble vampires did not tolerate schemes that threatened the stability of their hierarchy. Political rivalry was accepted, but falsifying sacred law was treason. Marcus stood at the center this time, not Cassian. His charm remained in place, but the cracks beneath it were visible. Isidora stood beside him again, though her posture had lost its earlier arrogance. The evidence had cornered them both. Era stood near Cassian, no longer hidden at the edge of the chamber. Though still human, her presence now carried legal and symbolic weight. She had spoken truth when it mattered, and the room knew it. The presiding elder spoke first, voice echoing through the hall. "Lord Marcus, you are charged with orchestrating a falsified fledgling accusation, illegal blood experimentation, and attempted destabilization of the throne. How do you answer?" Marcus exhaled slowly, then lifted his chin. "Progress requires risk. Cassian's protection of humans weakens our kind. I merely sought to expose his vulnerability." "You endangered sacred law," the elder replied coldly. "You poisoned a human child to fabricate evidence." Marcus did not deny it this time. His silence confirmed everything. Isidora attempted to speak, but the council silenced her sharply. Her participation in the false accusation had been documented as well. She had not planned the scheme, but she had supported it eagerly. Judgment came swiftly. Marcus was stripped of noble rank, his territory seized, his influence dissolved. Exile followed a fate worse than execution for a political vampire. Isidora's punishment was humiliation rather than banishment. Her titles were reduced, her authority stripped, and she was barred from court gatherings for a century. For immortals, that was a lifetime of disgrace. When the verdict ended, the chamber's attention shifted to Cassian. "You were falsely accused," the elder said, "yet your response altered royal law. You invoked a marital protection bond with a human. Do you intend to maintain this union?" The room quieted again. Cassian did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned slightly toward Era, allowing her the space to breathe rather than trapping her in expectation. His voice, when it came, was steady but unforced. The bond was invoked for protection, not possession. The choice moving forward is hers. All eyes moved to Era. She felt the weight of immortals measuring her worth, but she no longer felt small. The journey from accusation to this chamber had burned fear into strength. She looked at Cassian, not at the king, but at the man who had risked power to defend truth, who had carried guilt for his human mother across centuries. "I do not wish to be protected because I am weak," she said softly but clearly. "I wish to stand beside someone who respects humanity, not rules over it." Cassian's expression shifted, not surprise, but quiet approval. "Then stand," he replied simply. The council accepted her words without challenge. The bond, though born from necessity, remained recognized not as ownership, but as alliance. It symbolized a bridge long resisted between vampire authority and human dignity. Outside the chamber, beneath the fading glow of the blood moon, the night felt different, lighter. The political storm had passed, but its aftermath had reshaped the court. Leo recovered within weeks. The counterfeit toxin was neutralized through a rare antidote developed from lawful vampire blood and human medicine combined. He would remain human untouched by the forced darkness meant to frame a king. On the hotel terrace where everything had begun, Era stood beside Cassian once more. The city lights shimmered below, fragile yet alive. "You risked everything," she said quietly. Cassian looked out over the skyline. Power that protects only itself is not power. It is cowardice. She studied him, seeing not just the ruler, but the son who had once lost his mother to injustice. "And the bond?" she asked. He turned slightly, the faintest hint of warmth softening his ancient composure. "It remains. Only if you wish it to mean more than law." Era did not answer with words. She simply remained beside him, unafraid, unowned, equal in the quiet. Because this time, protection had not come from fear. It had come from respect. Ending line. And under the same moon that once witnessed injustice, a king finally kept the promise he failed to keep centuries ago.